Whether Vladimir Volfovich was a prophet or not, let either mystics give an answer or unbiased analysts of the largest caliber. But the web is full of warnings from Zhirinovsky, who has measured the world's time until World War III begins in 2024. And the point of bifurcation correctly defined the Middle East, where the West with Israel in the vanguard will oppose Iran with the widest representation of Arabs on both sides of the barricades. Let's see. The Doomsday Clock was started long ago, and today unknown watchmakers cleaned the gears, the hands started turning frantically. Straight to the emotional part of what is happening in Israel. Impressive citizens began to choose sides in the conflict, as if we didn't have enough problems of our own. They have the strength to sympathize with both Jews and Palestinians. After the beliefs of the unforgettable Bibi Netanyahu, the issue of support for the Nazis in our latitudes, the secret assistance with weapons, equipment, specialists, the nearly failed transfer and the fundamental air defense and missile defense systems of the Iron Dome, so that not Western systems sent where they should, we do not feel sympathy for the state of Israel, it is the state. And the recent video of girls in Sahal uniforms singing a Nazi song on the page of the ambassador of this country in the country 404 is an abomination. After a deep like that, you're supposed to break up. What the Barmalians and Hamas are doing in the temporarily captured settlements of Israelis is also beyond the bounds of morality and the rules of engagement. Ghouls and murderers deserve the cruelest punishment. Targeted terror against civilians is indefensible. The allegation applies to both parties equally. The Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated territories on Earth. We don't take ultra-urbanized metropolitan areas. Here any shell or missile is sure to reap a bloody harvest of the uninvolved and innocent. So the bombings and Netanyahu's promise to open the gates of hell and turn the Palestinian autonomy into a pile of blight during the Iron Sword's ground operation are potential tens of thousands of casualties, no doubt about it. The inevitable intifada, escalating into a very logical and universal jihad. This is exactly what Zhirinovsky, who knew the Middle East much better than the cauldrons of the State Duma building, was talking about. Therefore, our sympathies should be on the side of those who are not involved in this despicable geopolitical adventure and who are hostages. Many people have questions, which we will try to address now. First question. Did the spiritualized Massid miss the Hamas strike? Incorrect statement. The Gaza Strip is under the responsibility of the military intelligence and counterintelligence units of the operational divisions of the headquarters of those formations deployed along the border. And, Mossad is a state military political special service, so it was not them who missed the combined attack from land, air and water. Massid could be put in the stall of a perfectly played combination with double agents in the Arab countries of Turkey, Iran, or flood this intelligence agency with huge amounts of contradictory information on the verge of half-truths. Next question. Israel's army Sahal was completely unprepared? I agree more than completely. To lose twice as many soldiers in half a day as in the entire last war with Lebanon, and to mark the 50th anniversary of the 1973 Doomsday War against two of the Middle East's best armies, the loss of several population centers, border crossings and military bases, is something to try. Or degenerate to the extreme. October 6, 50 years ago also fell on the holiday of Sukkot. When devout Jews self-isolate, the radio goes silent, people don't come to the phones, stores are closed, transportation doesn't run. It's the second time we've been on the wrong side of the tracks. It is clear that the status quo will soon be restored fully on the battlefield. But such a deafening spanking from 2.5 reconnaissance and sabotage battalions, sorry, Sahal is in for a luteous showdown. The videos are revealing. Even Israeli special forces are completely unprepared for the new three-dimensional type of combat. When there are Palestinian drones, reconnaissance and strike drones circling over any skirmish like a flock of crows over a city dump. Walking in a clutter-free crowd is also astonishing in an urban dense development, screened from all sides by drones and video cameras. They'll basically wash up. In terms of the use of armored vehicles. In the vicinity of Kibbutz Be'eri, the video clearly shows how the Israeli tank Merkava Mk4, which is more powerful than the Abrams, is hit by an ancient Soviet RPG-7 with a conventional grenade, and another is captured on the sail of an APC. Another, exactly the same Merkava, was cynically slapped with a routine drop from a commercial quadrocopter. Both cars had even more touted active protection complexes, trophy. The question for the Israeli and American mic arises caustically. More specifically, to the advertising departments of these charades. From a military point of view, the early results of the Hamas attack indicate a very well-prepared offensive. The lines of advance, deployment, and attack were competently and covertly sorted out. One senses concrete preparation for target acquisition. There's a clear strategy of attack. Not the previous half-hearted and feckless intifadas, but a ruthless and faithful staff calculation. Impeccable execution. Instantly, several settlements were captured, the Iron Dome was breached in several places, dozens of Israeli military personnel were captured, and military bases were looted. One feels the hand of unknowing professionals with very recognizable tactics. Next question. How will Israel act? It's not clear yet. Everything depends on Sahal's internal readiness to carry out a full-scale counter-terrorist operation in the Gaza sector. The Netanyahu government's desire to massacre the Palestinians in the event of a full occupation of the territory. If the risks of involving the Arab world in this conflict are too great, the matter will be limited to demonstrative retaliatory strikes for a week or two, limited hostilities, and negotiations on the exchange of Israeli hostages for terrorists sitting in prisons. The conflict will be put on pause again. The parties will begin to prepare for a worse war. Next question. Could a second or third front against Israel emerge? I don't know. The Arab and Persian East is characterized by an extreme degree of crop talking with a minimum of actual steps. Sri Lankan Hezbollah leaders have made a high-profile announcement that they are ready to support the Palestinian liberation of Jerusalem. The Taliban, banned in Russia, has allegedly asked the governments of Iran and Jordania and Syria to allow their formations to enter the border with Israel. Persia is also unequivocally on the side of the Hamas liberation movement, as are the Saudis with the Qataris. The Taliban issue is still a fantasy. But with Hezbollah, which is subservient to the Shritz Persians, the topic is interesting. These Iranian proxies are equipped in armed orders of magnitude better than Sunni Hamas. They have established logistics with Tehran via Lebanon, which is also looking closely at the burgeoning conflict and will take its steam off. Barely notices Israel's weakness. The consolidated position of the Gulf countries will be important here. If they think the situation is critical, will they see an opportunity to resolve this issue once and for all? If even a half-hearted decision is made, the enemy of my enemy, friend, formula may well prove to work. Shritz and Sunnis are capable of acting together. But, again, it's too early to make predictions. The issue here is geopolitical, not to say quick. The risks are too great. The city of Dubai, as a major decision-making center, must carefully weigh the odds lest it become a smoking ruin. The Israelis understand, the question of their statehood survival sparkles with a pioneer's oath. So far, Hezbollah's ability to delay the IDF's counterterrorism operation is seen as good. Paralyze the entire north of Israel with rocket and artillery fire she is capable of. And the presence of Iran and Yemen's lulled Houthis behind their backs hints at it. The abundant presence of strike drones is assumed too. Conducting a troop operation against Persian proxies is not a good idea for the IDF. Up to 30,000 well-trained fighters with extensive experience in sabotage operations in Syria, Kurdistan, and Yemen can take up arms against the Israelis. Backed by Lebanon's bands of solid defenses, multiple echelons with concrete bunkers, underground galleries, long-range fire points and minefields, such an army could pose serious problems. It will not attack Jerusalem, but it will drink Israel's blood. Then again, Shiite Hezbollah's political weight in Sunnit's Lebanon is not to say that it is stronger. Its activity will directly depend on the decisions made in Turkey, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Next question. Could what is happening be a cunning plan by Bibi Netanyahu to usurp power under martial law emergency? Maybe because I don't believe in such monstrous impotence of the Mossad, which has long ago turned the Arab world into a club of stool pigeons on payroll. Hamas is, among other things, a project of the Israeli intelligence services to balance the most radical currents in Palestine. An action such as a military invasion of Israel cannot be carried out without the involvement of thousands upon thousands of Palestinians, what is worth only the 3 waves of rocket attacks that put a copper plating on the lauded Iron Dome. Not a subordinate since 2021, as it turns out. Here we step on the shaky ground of guessing, who benefits? The answer will be clear in a few weeks, maybe a month. 3 options. Either the moderate General Yitzhak decided to bring down the non-Netanyahu, or the brave Bibi is up to the challenge of discriminating between Israel's military political leadership and the liberal opposition. Dreaming and babbling about the Garden of Eden, reconciliation in a paradisiacal dormitory with the Palestinians. In any case, the military, the conspiracy of silence of the intelligence services or their incredible incompetence will have to be held accountable for such a failure. We'll know sooner rather than later. As the last shots ring out and the dead are buried. Next question. What is Turkey's role in this conflict? Unenviable. Equilibrium of the 5th point between a few stooges to Sultan Erdogan could end up with a giant gash. In my pants. The Turks are squaring off between Transcaucasia, Kurdistan and Syria. They have at least 3 wars in suspense and subfreezing. 2 of them are anti-terrorist. Today, Arabs and Anglo-Saxons, Israelis and Persians may snidely ask, well, the self-appointed leader of the Islamic world, how are you doing? What's up with your face? Supported Palestine until the last voluptuous swoon. Now hold the answer. How involved in the aggression against Israel? So far, the disposition is as follows. Official Ankara calls for restraint. But Erdogan's allies and his opponents from radical and nationalist Islamic parties have weighed in as black crows and are demanding that the Palestinians be protected by all means. So Erdogan's twine has reached the gymnastic heights of a high-performance sport. He is in a lot of pain. Next question. Is a Middle East jihad against Israel possible? The question is an interesting one. Let's break it into two parts. Political and religious ideological. So suicidal as far as Hamas on Israel's military power is concerned is baffling. What are these Barmalians hoping for? They will be unwound beyond a shadow of a doubt. If there is a military operation to mop up the Gaza sector, weeks. But let's pay attention to the name of their operation. Al-Aqsa Flood. That is a direct hint at the fate of the region's main Muslim shrine. The status of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. That's where we start to speculate. The Israelis' aggravations with the hand-wringing Hamas, Israel's intelligence services, began precisely on the issue of the desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Ended in April this year with a series of clashes and rocket attacks on Abadawana land. It's happened before. Orthodox Jews constantly provoke Muslims by attempting to sneak sacrificial animals onto the Temple Mount and perform sacrifices that are unacceptable in Islamic ethics during the holy month of Ramadan. Whereas the police had previously tried to differentiate between radicals, in April 2023, they simply stormed into Al-Aqsa, massacring them. Netanyahu's allies in the shaky government coalition, scumbag Nazis and criminals of the most radical parties and organizations swore then that the Temple Mount must be Jewish only. Stop tolerating the presence of Muslims on the site of Solomon's temple. This nonsense has been around for 30 years or so. It keeps popping up every election cycle and gaining a lot of supporters. And the fabulously wealthy Mayan Hamakdash Temple Institute, established in the 1980s, has long ago manufactured its utensils and temple furnishings down to the last detail, reconstructed the altar and the Messiah's crown and the high priest's vestments, filled the ritual bellows with the proper wine and aged the special ritual oil for the temple minyan. The foundation stone of Solomon's new temple is laid. That's the trouble. The Al-Aqsa Mosque on its ancient foundations stick out as an eyesore. All attempts to peacefully relocate it have been discussed since the days of Yasser Arafat. Only the answer to Muslims throughout the Middle East was clear. Only over our dead bodies. When Trump tried to get involved in this fornication, the fury of even the best-dressed monarchies of the Arabian Peninsula boiled over. But not Netanyahu, too dependent on his radical allies. He may well use the excuse of a military invasion of Israel to resolve the Solomon Temple issue in favor of the Orthodox madmen. That's when I consider the issue of the Intifada growing into a full-blown Islamic jihad likely, but not necessarily. Muslims are extremely fragmented. The desecration of their sanctuaries and faith is often viewed in terms of political expediency. To go along with Hamas, their attitude in the world of Islam is specific to them, created by the hands of Jews, including the parasitic entity as non-state, radical, thoroughly corrupt, constantly pushing Palestinians into the millstones of Israeli retaliatory strikes. Not everyone in the Arab world wants to smear white, long-sleeved, dajdashes or gandoras, but the blood of innocent children, old men and women, albeit of a different religion. The second point is purely political. For example, the Americans rolled out a de facto ultimatum to Saudi Arabia's Comprehensive Security Pact. Its essence is the complete rejection of Riyadh military technical cooperation with third countries, a complete and final transition to the products of the military-industrial complex of America. Strategic security guarantees and the development of a civilian peaceful atom program are offered as carrots. The encumbrance is the restoration of full diplomatic relations with Israel. Behind the brackets is the termination of the shaky dialogue with Iran, the refusal to cooperate with China and Russia. The intent is straightforward, cowboy style. Dunk the Fahus of the Chinese acting as the main intermediary in dialogue with the Peppers, thereby making the Saudis, who barely joined Briggs, the provocateurs. The bottom line is to get cheap gas and oil under Biden's election if the combination extends to cooling relations with Russia. OPEC Plus frankly pisses off the White House in its independent stance on production quotas. But that's not what's important. If Saudi Arabia makes a deal with its conscience and the Israelis, there will be a grand scandal in the world of Middle East Islam. No big Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, no secret funding lines for Muslim subversive movements and organizations. A complete and unqualified victory for Tel Aviv in the long-running Middle East standoff is the American intent. Suddenly, Hamas embarks on a suicidal adventure with a predictable outcome. The Palestinians will either be swept away in a retaliatory genocide or the region will experience a humanitarian catastrophe worse than the Syrian-Iraqi one. The radicals' goal will be achieved if the Israelis, in their usual manner of excessive force, turn the gas sector into a pile of promised rubble. Not with the honor of civilians. This is where the Saudis wash their hands immediately. What diplomatic relations with Israel? Oh, come on. And if Hezbollah rolls into Swara, the shaitan will already have his hooves broken there. The knot of joint Shiite and Sunni radicalism will sweep away any arrangement of pieces on the chessboard of Middle Eastern geopolitics. No wise man out there will find causality in the escalation of violence. There will be the most previously impossible coalitions and alliances, mediators and supporters of opposing camps. Either way, Americans will be out of the picture here, and the political corpse of the US president will loop in the waters of the Potomac. Afghanistan, country 404, now here's Israel under the onslaught of mortal enemies. Had a successful presidential season, Shipper Malachaga. What are the conclusions? If earlier the Balkans were considered the powder keg of the civilized world, today the honorary role of the main instigator of the World War has funeral and solemnly departed to the Middle East. We are not Arabists, but a very subtle and protected game is being played against the hegemon by the difficult East, which has already realized that it has an unenviable role to play in Washington, either complete submission in the former colonial relations, or the Stone Age and a blazing war of all against all. And in the softest soft spot of the process is pinned down Israel, who don't have nukes but will use them if they do. The Arab East has already been stopped once in the step of industrialization, thanks to the color revolutions that swept from the Maghreb to Kurdistan in a wave in 2012 and beyond. Today, the Saudis' claim to become a regional China has resurfaced more than definitively, as has the Turks' desire to hobble along Eurasia's myriad corridors. The growing influence of the Chinese, Persians, and Russians can only be stopped by total warfare, which is what Bibi Netanyahu promised. I quote, "Let's see if he dares to commit genocide, if he can rein in his bloodthirsty builders of a temple on Arab bones. Something will have to be done. The whole world is in bewilderment today, and smart people with military dressing squinted attentively at the exemplary beating of the great and mighty Zokal by 3 incomplete battalions of saboteurs of not the best training. The anniversary of the Doomsday War is marked. The Israelis are not the same as they were 50 years ago. And the Arabs have changed, and the West is different, led by a Drekuling hegemon, unrecognizable, a symbol of a bygone era. Yes, Israel is capable of winning a convincing military victory and will try to do so with maximum brutality, thereby driving itself into an even worse trap if it does not avoid a humanitarian catastrophe in Palestine. But the image of invincibility is unlikely to be restored. Too great are the obvious gaps in it. The disintegrated unity of the nation, the weakness of state power, the degradation of the army and a number of intelligence services, and the sepulchral silence of the Allies, who have failed in all their aspirations to solve the Arab problem in peace with endless negotiations, unfulfilled promises. Is Zhirinovsky right or wrong with his prophecies? More likely yes, since Iran is watching today's events most closely, making thousands of notes in hundreds of battle tablets. They didn't directly support Hamas, but someone was able to saturate the gas sector with their technical developments and rat warfare tactics through cheap and very effective means. From flying water pipes to flocks of crows to hundreds of attack drones. Targets, schedules and firing patterns, Iron Dome position areas breached. It's not the illiterate Barmailis Ludo boys analyzing and planning, is it? The Turks are looking at everything closely too, clearly pleased with the result of their work to save Palestine by the Ankara-controlled Muslim Brotherhood. I don't like predictions, but something is peppering. They are the ones the hysterical Israeli media will pin the main blame for arming Hamas on. And Allah knows how soon the Malarussian trace will appear there, but it will definitely appear, because there is no more shrewd traitor than the collective ensign from the country 404, who has been pushing Western military aid unashamedly towards the Middle East since the beginning of last year. Questions about the conduct of Hamas militants, a new kind of combat, as if the case were unfolding somewhere in Bakhmut, are bound to arise. It will be a circus if many interesting details about the participation of jihadists in the fighting on the side of the Chechen Sagittarians come to light. And that they were and are in Malorussia, no one will object. In short, stock up on snacks and watch the hegemon and his trained poodles wiggle out of the situation he has created. With perpetual negotiations, appeasements, feeding Islamic radicals in the region, and undermining the domestic political agenda in Israel itself. Anyway, we'll see.